Well, what can I say? There are a lot of moments that they are in us forever.
After 40 years as one of the most iconic voices of the world's biggest pop group, Agnetha Fältskog is finally opening up. And the truth about ABBA's golden cage might just shock you.
To do the best of it and to put myself in that situation that the lyrics is about.
Agnetha, the co-lead singer of ABBA, became a global icon when she was just in her 20s, but fame came with a price many never saw. Now, after years away from the spotlight, she made a surprising solo comeback with her new album, A Plus, in 2023, leaving fans to wonder if the ABBA fairy tale ever ended. We are diving into new music, hidden personal struggles, and shocking revelations about her life and ABBA's hidden cost of fame.
But we found a good balance in this, but it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone to do that.
But what exactly happened behind the scenes of ABBA's fairy tale fame that changed Agnetha forever? Rise to stardom and early success. If you have ever hit play on Dancing Queen during a study break, or you grew up hearing your parents blast Mamma Mia in the car, you already know the energy Agnetha brought to ABBA. Her voice, so clear and warm, became the sound of summer road trips and last song of the night moments for millions of people across the world. But here's the thing. Behind those sequins and catchy hooks was a life that wasn't nearly as picture-perfect as the polished posters you see floating around vintage Instagram pages.
Give you a little sample, and it's a bit hard to break away.
Let's pull back the curtain for a moment. Agnetha, born in Sweden in the late 1940s, was more than just a singer in ABBA. She was the heartbeat of the band alongside Annie Frid, Bjorn, and Benny. And she became a global icon when ABBA rocketed to fame after winning Eurovision back in the 1970s. They went from playing small Swedish venues to performing for screaming crowds in countries they barely had time to explore. During those years, ABBA wasn't just a pop group, it was the pop group. They sold more than 150 million records. That's a number so massive you can't really wrap your head around it unless you picture everyone in the United Kingdom, France, and Italy all owning at least one ABBA album. The band became a global brand before social media even existed. And while the rest of the world saw smiling faces, matching outfits, and glittering stages, Agnetha's reality was something else entirely. See, while many people would think being in the world's biggest pop band is the ultimate dream, Agnetha has recently been hinting that the golden glow of ABBA's fame came with a cage. The constant travel, the blinding attention from the press and fans, and the pressure to always be the bright, smiling Agnetha on stage were crushing at times. Even though the band stopped performing live in 1980, the image of ABBA never really left. And for Agnetha, it became hard to truly step out from under its shadow. Fast forward to 2023, and Agnetha made a move that nobody expected. After decades of selective media appearances and living a quiet life away from the constant buzz, she returned with a new solo album, A+. And it wasn't just another nostalgia cash grab. This album brought her voice back to the forefront, reminding people why they fell in love with her in the first place, but also hinting at the chapters of her story that never got told when ABBA was topping every chart on the planet.
You don't believe it. It's so incredible done.
It's easy to think of Agnetha only as that young Swedish blonde on stage, but let's not forget she was writing songs by the time she was 13 years old. Before ABBA, she already had a career in Sweden, and she was putting her soul into her music long before Eurovision's flashing lights came knocking. This isn't just a singer who got lucky. Agnetha is a musician who was caught between personal dreams and the unstoppable machine that ABBA became. When ABBA announced their Digital Voyage concerts, fans across the globe lost their minds. and many wondered if the real band would step back on stage one last time. In a recent interview, Agnetha teased that she would be open to a live reunion, even for Eurovision, hinting that the story isn't as closed as people think. And let's be real, the idea of seeing ABBA perform live after all these years is something that would break the internet. But what's more fascinating is the why behind Agnetha's words. Why? After all these years of stepping back, is she willing to consider it now? Is it about unfinished business? Is it about reclaiming something she lost in those years when fame became a burden instead of a blessing? Agnetha has talked about how much she struggled with flying, how the travel took a toll on her mental health, and how she felt separated from her children during the endless tours that made ABBA a household name.
I also had, or Björn and I had, our small children.
Imagine having to put on a sparkling outfit and smile for stadiums when all you want is to be home with your family, away from the camera flashes and the never-ending questions about your personal life. This was Agnetha's reality during ABBA's peak years. Her recent interviews reveal a person who has finally made peace with the past but isn't afraid to acknowledge its scars. She has said she now feels more confident and relaxed, embracing her age and her experiences, and for many fans, it is refreshing to hear her speak with this level of honesty about a band that often felt like a fairy tale frozen in time. It turns out, the real story behind the glitter was far more human and relatable than the polished posters ever let on. And here's what makes this even more intriguing. Agnetha's new music doesn't just sound like someone trying to relive their past glory days. Instead, it sounds like an artist who has reclaimed her voice, narrative, and place in the world on her own terms. Her album A+ features re-recordings and new layers, blending her past with her present. A reminder that her story is still unfolding and worth paying attention to. If you are scrolling late at night, looking for stories that pull back the curtain on the world's biggest brands and icons, Agnetha's story will give you exactly that, but with a human touch that is rare in the music industry. It's about the cost of fame, the power of resilience, and the beauty of finding your voice again after the noise has died down. But what exactly happened behind the scenes of ABBA's fairy tale fame that changed Agnetha forever? The hidden struggles. Behind the shimmering costumes and platinum records, Agnetha faced life-altering trauma that few knew about, and it would haunt her for decades. You see, if the outside world saw a shining blonde icon at the front of ABBA, what they could not see was how fear was quietly shaping her life, decision by decision, for years. For many, it started with the headlines calling her the recluse, but that word, tossed around in tabloids, does not capture what really happened behind the scenes. It was 1979, and ABBA was riding high, flying around the world to perform for thousands of people who would scream the moment Agnetha stepped on stage. The group boarded a Howard Hughes private jet for their American tour, a symbol of their enormous success. But that flight would become a turning point in Agnetha's life. As the jet flew over Boston, a violent tornado forced an emergency landing, the turbulence shaking the plane so fiercely that Agnetha, who was already uneasy with flying, was left trembling. She later described it as one of the most terrifying moments she had ever experienced, the fear gripping her so completely that it planted a seed of lifelong dread every time she had to step on a plane again.
I don't like to fly. On our tour, I think we flew from New York to Boston.
It is easy to dismiss a fear of flying until you are the one strapped into a seat, feeling every bump, every drop, while being thousands of feet above the ground with no control over what happens next. For Agnetha, who already valued the comfort of home and her family's safety, that flight marked the beginning of a fear that would eventually contribute to her pulling away from the spotlight. But the fear did not stop there. In 1983, just a few years after that flight, Agnetha was involved in a bus accident in Sweden. The bus skidded off the icy road and crashed, leaving her with a concussion and a neck injury. It was a painful reminder that even when her feet were on the ground, the world could still be dangerous, and her body, her instrument for singing, could be hurt in an instant. These were just the physical fears, the ones that the media would occasionally mention before moving on to another glossy photo of her in a sparkling jumpsuit. But the emotional storms were even more intense. In 1994, Agnetha's mother, Birgit, took her own life, and Agnetha kept this devastating loss private for nearly 10 years. It is hard to imagine the weight of carrying such grief quietly, especially when your face is still recognized by fans around the world who expect you to smile and wave. Just 1 year later, Agnetha's father passed away, another blow that would push her further into the safety of her private world. Around this time, Agnetha briefly found hope in love, marrying surgeon Thomas Sonnenfeld in the early 1990s. But the marriage ended quietly, and it was another chapter that closed without the world ever truly knowing what she was going through while they continued to play Waterloo at weddings and parties. But perhaps the most chilling part of Agnetha's hidden struggles was the stalking that would come to define her sense of safety for years. In 1997, a Dutch fan named Gert van der Graaf began stalking her, and the situation escalated until authorities stepped in. But even after he was deported, the fear never truly left. The constant worry about being watched, followed, and found, even in the quiet corners of Sweden, became part of Agnetha's reality. This was not the harmless fandom people often romanticize. It was a shadow that followed her every day, making even the simplest activities feel like risks she could not afford to take. Recently, reports emerged that this same stalker was seen in Sweden again in 2024, decades after the original nightmare began. Imagine living with that kind of fear for such a long time, never fully knowing if you are safe, even as the rest of the world still sees you as the smiling blonde from ABBA. In recent interviews, Agnetha has reflected on these experiences with a rare honesty. She spoke about how the media's obsession with her appearance reduced her, saying, "After a while, it's not funny anymore. When you are famous, people think they know you and feel entitled to your time, space, and even your body." For Agnetha, this was not just an annoyance. It was a violation of her humanity. Yet, despite all of this, Agnetha made a choice that many could not understand at the time. She chose to protect her privacy and create boundaries that the world was not used to seeing from its pop stars. When tabloids labeled her a recluse, they missed the point entirely. This was a woman who had seen the cost of fame, who had felt the fear of losing control over her life, and who decided that her peace was worth more than any public praise. And this is where the story becomes even more human. Behind every stage performance was a person carrying fear from a near plane crash, pain from a bus accident, grief from losing both parents, and anxiety from being stalked by someone who refused to let go. It is easy to watch ABBA's music videos and see only the glitter, the smiles, and the perfectly timed choreography, but it is much harder and much more important to remember that Agnetha was a human being who had to carry these hidden struggles while the world danced to her voice. It is no wonder that when she sings, there is a depth to her voice that is impossible to fake. You can hear it in the softer moments, the slight catch in her breath, the pauses that let the lyrics sink in a little deeper. It is the sound of someone who has lived through real fear and real loss, someone who understands the value of peace and the courage it takes to step back into the world after being hurt by it. This is what makes Agnetha's story so powerful, especially now, 40 years later, as she begins to share pieces of herself again through her music and interviews. It is not about reclaiming fame or returning to the spotlight for the sake of nostalgia. It is about a woman finding her voice again on her own terms, knowing exactly what it cost to keep it. So if you have ever felt like the world expects you to smile when you do not have the strength to, if you have ever felt the weight of fear that keeps you from stepping out the door, Agnetha's story is a reminder that even behind the biggest stages and the brightest lights, people are carrying struggles you may never see. And if the outside world saw perfection, the inside was a fortress. So how did this affect her voice and music? The voice of a legend. You know, people often act like time has nothing on legends. Like if you hit play on an old ABBA record, the clear, powerful voice you hear from Agnetha is frozen in time forever, untouched by years and untouched by the life that happened off stage. But life does not work like that, even for legends. In 2023, during an interview with BBC Radio 2, Agnetha sat down and shared something that caught fans off guard. She admitted her voice has, in her own words, dropped a little in tone. She said it with a calm acceptance, a quiet confidence that comes only when you have spent decades understanding who you really are beyond your voice. Imagine having your voice recognized instantly by millions and then having to face the reality that it is changing, not because you did something wrong, but because time keeps moving, whether we like it or not. In another conversation with The Telegraph, she opened up about the reality of recording new music at her age. She acknowledged using a touch of auto-tune on her vocals for her 2023 album A+, something she had never done before. She described it as a tool, not a crutch, helping her align with modern production while staying true to her sound. It is easy to judge when you see headlines about auto-tune, but what many people miss is that Agnetha is not hiding from aging. She is adapting, and she is doing it with intention. When her single, Where Do We Go From Here, dropped, you could feel the ripple across her fandom. From those who first fell in love with her voice in the 1970s to Gen Z listeners discovering her music while scrolling late at night looking for something real in a world full of polished noise. The song carries her warmth, but if you listen closely, you can sense the depth that age brings. A quiet gravity layered beneath the melody. And it makes sense. Life leaves its mark on us all. And for singers, that mark shows up in every note. And here's the thing that is easy to forget while streaming songs on shuffle. Agnetha has lived a life that could fill libraries with stories. From the heights of global stardom with ABBA, to stepping away for her family, to living with the fears that came with fame, her voice has carried every chapter. It is not about whether her voice is perfect anymore, it is about the truth she carries in it now. When A+ was released, the reactions were telling.
Because I thought they were very, very fantastic songs. Very good quality, good melody.
Fans were not disappointed that her voice sounded different. They were moved by her honesty. They appreciated that she returned with new music, not to reclaim some past glory, but to share her art at this stage of her life, allowing people to grow with her. Some even said it felt like catching up with an old friend, hearing how she has changed and how she has stayed the same all at once. In an industry that often pressures women, especially women in music, to freeze themselves in time, Agnetha choosing to return with a voice that has changed, and with songs that reflect who she is now, is a quiet rebellion. She did not have to return. She could have stayed silent, letting the myth of ABBA's flawless vocals stand untouched. But instead, she chose to share her music again, to remind people that there is beauty in change. Of course, this leads us to the question everyone keeps asking. Will ABBA ever reunite on stage for real? With Eurovision 2024 having passed without that moment, people still speculate. Agnetha has been careful, even cautious, in how she speaks about a potential reunion. In an interview, she said, "I'd rather be quiet," a phrase that carries weight when you consider her past, her struggles with fame, and her deep understanding of what stepping back onto a live stage would mean. But even in her caution, there is a soft hint of possibility, like a door left slightly open. Fans hold on to that hope, imagining a moment where ABBA's music fills a live venue again with all four voices blending, older, wiser, but still capable of magic. The question lingers, would it be the same, or would it be something entirely new, something deeper, something that acknowledges the years that have passed? And maybe that is the real conversation we need to have about legends like Agnetha. Does age diminish genius, or does it deepen its soul? Listening to A+, it feels like the latter. Her voice carries stories now, not just melodies, and that is something only time can teach. When you play her recent songs alongside ABBA classics, the contrast is not a reason to mourn what was, but to appreciate what is, and what can still be. Think about it. We live in a world that chases youth relentlessly, where artists are often pushed to stay the same while everything around them changes. Agnetha choosing to share her evolving voice, to admit to using tools like auto-tune when it helps, and to continue creating without pretending she is the same as she was in the 1970s is more powerful than trying to freeze time. It is a reminder that art is not about perfection. It is about honesty, connection, and the courage to keep sharing, even when you know some people will judge. For Agnetha, this chapter is not about reclaiming a throne. It is about sharing her music on her terms, with her story, her voice, and her truth. Whether or not ABBA reunites, and whether or not she sings live again, the legacy she continues to build with every song she releases is one of resilience, honesty, and an unbreakable connection with listeners who see themselves reflected in her journey. And as you sit there, maybe late at night, scrolling through stories of the world's biggest stars and hidden truths, think about what Agnetha's story means for you. We all change, we all age, and we all carry stories that shape our voices, even if we are not singing them to a crowd of thousands. Maybe the next time you hear Dancing Queen, you will listen for the layers beneath the music, the life that built the sound, and the courage it takes to keep sharing, even when time changes your voice. So what is the real price Agnetha paid for pop perfection?
Difficult decision, because the music is a part of us.
The Untold Legacy. It is easy to see the glitter and glam, but Agnetha's true story is about the price of being pop's perfect angel, and why that price still echoes today. Most people see ABBA as that unstoppable disco train from the 1970s, all shimmering jumpsuits, rotating stages, and perfect harmonies. And at the center of it, Agnetha, the angelic blonde with the piercing, clear voice, a voice that felt like freedom on the dance floor. But if you pause for a moment, if you slow down the music, you will find that behind that voice was a quiet child from Jönköping who once sang for her stuffed animals, who found safety in music because it was safer than the noise around her. Agnetha's childhood was shaped by her parents' complicated relationship, and even as a young girl, she carried a sensitivity that made her retreat inward when things got loud. And when ABBA's fame exploded, that sensitivity did not disappear. It just got buried under the expectations of millions.
ABBA goes on. ABBA is resting for the moment. The boys are writing material for a musical.
At the peak of ABBA's fame, tabloids were not shy about treating her like an object. She has spoken about being described in the press as body parts rather than a person, a constant dissection that stripped her of her humanity in the name of pop culture consumption. And just like any machine that chews up stars, the industry expected her to keep smiling, keep showing up, keep delivering. But fame's golden cage was a real thing, and for Agnetha, it was not just a metaphor. It was a psychological prison, made worse by the constant scrutiny of cameras, the demands for perfection, and the suffocating nature of always being watched. The Netflix documentary ABBA, against the odds, gives us a glimpse into this reality. We see her laugh, yes, but we also see those moments when her eyes drop, and you can tell she is remembering the fear of flights she could barely handle, the loneliness after shows, the guilt of leaving her children behind, and the crushing pressure to be perfect for the world, while her own world felt fragile. It is in those small moments where she is quiet and reflecting that you see her humanity shine through the image. And her retreat from the public eye in the 1980s and 90s, often labeled as diva behavior, was not about arrogance. It was a survival strategy. The constant objectification, stalkers showing up at her doorstep, the pressure to perform, and the endless judgment on her looks and personal life all compounded into an environment where isolation became a shield, a way to protect what was left of her peace. Yet, through all of this, Agnetha held on to music as a lifeline. When she recorded again and stepped back into the studio, it was not about chasing chart numbers or reclaiming past fame. It was about reconnecting with the only part of fame that was ever real to her: the music itself. She recorded at her own pace, under her terms, in spaces that felt safe, crafting songs that allowed her to express who she was becoming, not who the world expected her to be. And here is where the narrative shifts. It is easy to see Agnetha as a fragile figure swallowed by fame, but when you look closer, you see a woman who quietly, fiercely protected herself, who found a way to heal piece by piece, and who chose to return to music when it felt right, not when the industry demanded it. Fans who watched her through the years, from the young mother on stage with ABBA to the woman who came back with A+ decades later, see that resilience. It is a reminder that even in the pressure cooker of superstardom, it is possible to reclaim your story, to take back your narrative, and to redefine what success means on your terms. And the beauty of Agnetha's legacy is that it does not just live in the flawless high notes of The Winner Takes It All, or the sparkling harmonies of Dancing Queen. It lives in her quiet strength, her decision to walk away when it became too much, and her courage to return when she was ready, with a voice changed by time but layered with stories that only living can bring. Agnetha's journey reframes her as more than just the face of ABBA's golden age. She becomes a symbol of personal strength, of the cost of fame, and of the quiet, powerful rebellion of a woman choosing herself in a world that demanded her to be perfect for everyone else. As you sit there, maybe playing her music softly in the background, let it remind you that what you see on stage is never the full story. The glitter fades, but the strength it takes to survive fame's golden cage and come back with your spirit intact is the kind of legacy that truly matters. After all these years, where does Agnetha go from here, and what does the future hold for ABBA's legend? Agnetha's present life, and what's next? Since around 2023, this has been her chosen rhythm, waking up with the sunrise, tending to her animals, keeping her circle small, while the world still hums with ABBA's timeless sound. She spends quiet afternoons reading, sometimes replaying old melodies on the piano just to feel the notes dance in the room again, living a life that feels worlds away from the roaring crowds that once waited for her at airports and stadium gates. Even though she once called ABBA Voyage likely their last project, whispers keep swirling about possible reunions, maybe even a Eurovision surprise, as fans piece together hopeful clues from every word she says. And yet, there are shadows even in this quiet. The stalking threat that haunted her for years reappeared in 2024, shaking that peace, reminding her and everyone watching that fame's echo can follow you no matter how far you move into the countryside. It is one reason she stays cautious, stepping into the public eye only when she chooses, and only on her terms, valuing her safety and her sanity over the spotlight. Despite all of this, her creativity has not faded. Her renewed solo success with A+ and the Warmth fans showed her new music, which proves that the world is still listening, still eager to hear what Agnetha wants to share next, if she ever decides to step back into the spotlight again. She continues to record small ideas, saving them for the right moment, reminding us that the artist within her never truly stopped creating. Might ABBA surprise us after all? Might she walk on a stage with that knowing smile one more time, singing not for the world's demand, but for her own joy? From pop's perfect angel to a woman who faced her deepest fears, Agnetha's journey shows us the cost of fame and the strength it takes to reclaim your voice. What surprised you most about her story? Share your favorite ABBA memory or song in the comments, and we'll see you in our next video.